Transfiguration Sunday. And it's we read this text right before we start the journey of Lent. It's the text about the day Jesus and Elijah and Moses, three great leaders, they all went on top of a really high mountain. And Peter, John, and Andrew, they had an experience of God that changed their life forever. So I am still trying to get my head around the meaning of this story experience, but I believe it is something about seeing God in a new way, seeing ourselves in a new light. So last night, I decided to look up transfiguration, and it was under Wikipedia's explanation. And in very small print was the question. This is really true. Why do you want to look up the meaning of transfiguration anyway? Doesn't matter. So I wondered why in the world I did not choose the alternative text. So here it goes. The story spoke to me somehow, especially today before the annual meeting. So I'm going to read to you from Mark. It's the same story as Luke in your bulletin. It's just with different eyes. So listen for God. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah and Moses, and they were all talking with Jesus. And then Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. And then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice, and it said, "This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him." And suddenly they looked all around, and they saw no one with them anymore. It was just Jesus. And as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. Please pray with me. Spirit of God, you stand before us as this awesome, mysterious presence. Help us to see you. Startle us this morning. Amaze us with something new. In your name we do pray. Amen. Do you ever look around and wonder, is this all there is? Sometimes it might be just this question, and sometimes it could be a season. I do that. Sometimes I just look at my life and what's happening with the church, and I go, come on, is this all there is? We look at life and circumstances and we want more. We're restless, we're searching, we're longing for something else. Sometimes it's a midlife crisis. Sometimes it can make us do crazy things. This searching and this seeking. We get a new job, a new car, a new relationship. Maybe we take up a new hobby or go on a trip or work extra hours, but not much changes. I think the church is asking the same kind of questions. But I think all of this is not about the circumstances of life. I think it's about us. The restlessness, this desire for something new. I believe it means that we have been living a life that's too shallow. Church has become like that, I think. Life and relationships, they become superficial. We've been skimming across the surface, someone said. And, in many ways, living on the surface is much easier. It's more efficient. It's encouraged and rewarded by much of the world today. It fails, however, to see and experience that the world is already transfigured and creation is filled with the divine light. Life on the surface, it keeps judging the circumstances. We look at our circumstances, like a picture. And if it's pretty and pleasing and shows us what we want to see, then God and life is good as it can be. When we don't see what we want, when we don't see what we want, then we often look for a new picture. The restless, searching, this longing for more, this desire for meaning or not, however, usually is not answered by changed circumstances. The answer, I think, is found in depth, in intimacy, vulnerability of our interior journey. Do you know what I mean? It's not on the outside, but it's something on the inside. And maybe that's the church's problem. We do not need to see new things. I think we need to see the old things with new eyes. We do not need to hear a different voice. We need to hear the same old voice, but with different ears. We do not need to escape the circumstances of our lives. We need to be more fully present to those circumstances. I'm still trying to get my head around all this. When this happens, life is no more lived at the surface. These are the transfigured moments, I think, moments when the picture of our life has become a window into a new world and we come face to face with the glory of God. Most of us, I think, we seek God in the circumstances of life. We seek God in the circumstances of life. We want God to show up, be present, do something. This is the God who does. This is the God described in Mark's Gospel up to the point of today's reading. We might think about this as the first part of the spiritual journey. It is the journey, certainly, of discovering God in our circumstances, and that's what the disciples have been doing. They have seen this Jesus cast out demons, heal Peter's mother, cure the sick of Capernaum. He cleansed the leper, made a withered hand new. Those who are lame walk, the blind see, thousands are fed. This is the God about whom people talk about. The God that gets likes and shares on Facebook. But here's the point. At some point, we must begin to discover God who is beyond the circumstances, beyond where we are. This is the God who is. And this is the second part of the spiritual journey. Jesus is leading Peter, James, and John up the mountain to discover that God who is beyond circumstances. Transfiguration. Here's their picture of life circumstances. The picture of their life circumstances will become windows, and then they can move into the depths of God's light and God's love. It's not a picture anymore. They're moving into it. And there on the mountain, these three guys saw Jesus transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could lose them. And the story tells us the cloud overshadowed them, and the Father's voice spoke of his beloved Son, and our good old friend Peter wants to build dwelling places, churches. He wants to frame Jesus, Elijah, and Moses, and he says, it's good for us to be here. He wants to preserve it. He wants to simply take a picture. And the problem is, pictures are static. So on the Mount of Transfiguration, our pictures of life circumstances, they can become windows, and we can step into a new world, a new way of seeing, a new way of hearing, and a new way of being. And that's exactly what happened for Peter, James, and John. Jesus did not suddenly light up and become something he was not. No, their eyes were healed and opened so that they could see Jesus as he had always been. The voice in the cloud was not new. Their eyes were open and they heard the voice that never ceased speaking from the beginning. This transfiguration is as much about them as it is about Jesus. So perhaps our picture of life circumstances, it's not static, but it's a window into new life. We stand in a transfigured moment. Circumstances haven't changed. We have changed. And that seems to change everything. I wonder if that's that's a message to our church. These transfigured moments, they're all around us. It's not just some special getting on the mountaintop. Every one of us, I'm sure, every one of you could tell a story about stepping back from a picture of your life, seeing with new eyes, listening with different ears, and discovering this window that is open into another world and another way of being. Maybe it was the day you revealed to another person the secret you had carried for years. In telling the secret, the picture of your life that was of guilt and shame instead became this open window that you could step through. The darkness gave way to light. The chains fell off and forgiveness overcame sin. Looking into the picture of transfiguration. I remember one time I was speaking with a woman who was dying. We talked and laughed and cried and we sat in silence. And she said she'd had some experiences. She had visions and heard voices. And she said, "Is that real? Is it normal?" "Yes," I said, "absolutely." So this picture of her life as one of cancer, pain, and suffering had become this open window through which she stepped. She began to understand that in the midst of her cancer, she was already being healed. There is so much more going on than we usually know or see, she said. The tears and fear are real, but just as real is the voice that says to her, "Oh, my darling, my beloved, you are okay." Those windows are everywhere, I think, if we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear them. The hard part is we want to go back to those transfigured moments. We're tempted to build dwelling places, but Booth's dwelling places will only keep us in the past. When we cling to the past, we close ourselves to God's future. So Peter, James, and Jesus and John came back down the mountain because they couldn't stay there, but neither did they leave the mountain. They took it with them. It is what would carry them through the passion and crucifixion to the resurrection. I think Presbyterian Church of the Apostles is at a transfigured moment. And these moments can change us, sustain us, prepare us, encourage, and guide us into the future regardless of the circumstances we are in the midst of. Transfigured moments, they show us who we are. And we are a transfigured, transformed people of God. So open your eyes. See this transfigured world. Open your ears and hear this transfiguring voice. Open your hearts and become a transfigured life. I think that's a message. Every picture of life is an open window that says, no, that is not all there is. God has absolutely called the Presbyterian Church of the Apostles, all of you and me, and we have important ministry ahead of us. There is so much more going on than we usually see or know. And God says, you are my